ask ourselves some questions and show you some of our development processes and some of our ideas. And then at the end, cut to you, and you can ask us all kinds of horrible questions, I'm sure. So first up, the obvious one, what is AC3? And I know everyone has theories, and you'd say it's an open world, third-person action-adventure game and all that sort of stuff, but what I thought I'd present is how we think of it as a studio. And really, when we talk about the game, we're talking about three different gameplay pillars. The first one is navigation. On AC3, everyone said, oh, AC is always about climbing on buildings, but we say, no, it's just about navigation. So you can actually take a step back and say that AC is just about climbing. So you'll see us talk a lot about climbing on trees and other things later in the presentation. It's also about fight. Combat is a central pillar of the game, and we always thought it was something we could do better. So with AC3, I don't know how many of you have played the demo out on the floor so far? A few hands going up, okay. Everyone probably got their ass kicked then by the new fight system, I'm sure. It's a brand new rebuild for us. It's a brand new assessment of how we approach combat and why we do what we do. So we wanted to go back to roots on that. And also social stealth. The game is really about stealth and blending in a crowd. It was something that was very key to Assassin's Creed 1. We sort of pulled back from it a little bit in subsequent games, so we wanted to add some more features in AC3 just about that. So you'll see that you can move through high grass and stay hidden. There's new tools like the rope dart for assassinating people quietly, all that sort of stuff. So once we take these gameplay pillars then, we really set them in the context. And the context for us is the American Revolution. It's worth mentioning, obviously, that the American Revolution is not the story of the game. You are not a character who is winning the American Revolution. This is the sort of meat and potatoes background events that are happening while we tell our fictional story. And then, of course, we bound all that together with different living world elements, the crowd and the city. So how are we going to evolve those? Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. So to stay high-level design, just for one more moment, another way we think about it is we like to put all of our features into buckets in terms of how we think you guys are going to deal with them. So some of our features are basically there for progression. In other words, these are the things you do to make the story move forward, the main missions, the constraints that are part of those missions. We also have events that we think of as multitasking. We tried to do a lot of this on AC3, more than we've done in the past. The idea being that even though you can't change history, the game is not about killing George Washington and turning the tide of history, but we wanted you to take time out from those things to do other bits, along the way to performing these historical events, to have the option to take part in different activities. We also put a whole bunch of features we call surprise features, the idea being that we try to interrupt you while you're doing things. So as you're moving through the world, we'll have people come at you, offer you opportunities, add to a new system we call the quest system. And finally, of course, we have a lot of toy elements, which we put there just for you to take time out from the main story as you move forward. And the way we test that, it's open world. Obviously, this is not exactly what we expect you to do, but we write often what we call player narratives. So we'll put all those features together in a mock storyline just to test it out. So we'll say maybe while you're on your way to the Liberty Tree, which is a story mission, you get, what are we doing? I buy some traps and you're putting them down because you have a whole bunch of extra tasks to do with that. Hopefully, when you get some skins, you get access to a new outfit that you can use as part of the toy. But you're trying to, as you're doing that, you're stalked by a bunch of smugglers who attack you. You fight back, obviously, but you want to kill them in a specific way because there are challenges that will reward you if you do that. Then you decide, oh, screw it, I'm not going to do that main mission. Instead, I'm going to go play a board game. That's part of the toy. And then, when you finish that toy, we push back at you and have someone offer you membership of a club. And so obviously, we don't expect you to do exactly that, but it's a way of testing that at least we have enough features to make a robust experience. So why America? Another big question, probably more so in this room than when I'm doing this presentation in America. What we look for in any setting for Assassin's Creed is to go somewhere that's a big pivotal turning point in history. We like a period of conflict where people obviously are getting killed, where big events are happening. We also like going places that other games haven't been, and we like going places where specifically our franchise hasn't been. The American Revolution, even though a lot of games are set in America, I can guarantee you that you've never seen 18th century America. We also think it's a very relevant setting. Again, a funny thing to say, you might say, when it's the American Revolution. But if you think about it, up until the end of the Revolution, this is essentially a European conflict. The joke in England was it's a civil war fought on foreign soil. Almost 50% of the troops at every major battle on the Patriot side were French. It's the French blockade of the port at Yorktown that stops the British being resupplied, that causes the British to surrender. The American troops are trained by a guy called von Steuben, who's German. So this is a hugely European conflict when you get into the heart of it, and it's, of course, the founding of America as well.
And we got a lot of comments like, why do you want to kill the British? I think I've been sent here as the token Brit on the team to explain that basically when you go in Boston, you'll hear that everyone has an English or a Scottish or an Irish accent even. It's very much everyone is British. There is no America until the end of the game. So I think you'll find that quite surprising.
It was also an interesting question I always thought, as an Australian working in Canada for a French company, why I'm angry at the British, but yep. Trust me, we're not. We love you guys. You're all so nice. Also, it gives us this great fantasy, which is being the man of the revolution. And again, you're not fighting for America, but you get to take part in these key events that propel this massive change in America. So throughout the game, you'll see things like the Boston Tea Party. You'll take part in massive battles at places like Bunker Hill. There'll be these big moments that hopefully resonate with you guys. And just to talk very briefly in terms of story as well, in terms of the universal themes that are part of the story of the American Revolution, this idea of liberty or death, power versus slavery, control versus freedom. These are actually the sort of pivotal story points we try to use in our fictional narrative. Like those of you who are fans of the brand know that the argument between the Assassins and the Templars is not about good versus evil. It's not a very interesting story. The story we're trying to tell is the argument between the Assassins who believe in personal freedom and the Templars who believe that humans need to be controlled. So we saw a really neat fit between these two stories.
You can start that running. So back 2 years ago, we didn't have a team. We were just a small group of directors. So we essentially had to sell the idea to Ubisoft that was exactly what Alex explained, was a worthy story. It was a great place to put the Assassin's Creed story in there. So when you don't have a team, what you do is you can actually do something like this. We decided to go different and actually make 3D models, and then we'd film it and just talk our way through where the Assassins fit into this. And the irony about this is it was actually cheaper to make this in real life than it was to actually do it in CG. So you're about to see a video that nobody's seen outside of Ubisoft before.
Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We held these truths to be self-evident. Doing so was a mistake. Since the moment of its discovery, this had been a country defined not by hope and vision, but treachery and greed. And so for every one of us who sought to escape the king's tyranny, there was another who wished instead to control it.
Get 'em, boys!
America was not just a new world, but a new opportunity. Land and resources ripe for the taking. Fortunate, then, that we had the means to fight them. History speaks of a war, one in which men rose up against an empire so that they might be free. This is the revolution you know. Stay a while, and I will tell you of another revolution, the one that matters.
So through these videos, you'll probably see a bunch of revs just on the title screen, but also the assassin. You can see us sort of working through a bunch of ideas as well. So if you think about the two sort of fantasies that drive the franchise, one of them is being an assassin. So when we look at the features we're including in the game, we look at what can we do to extend that fantasy into our new setting. But the second is also this idea of being a tourist in time. You know, you want to be in this place that you've never been before, to see people dressed appropriately, to explore a city that is vibrant and different to the one you know. And we really felt that this sort of new world, this blend of wider streets, of nature still in the cities, of a younger city, of a city, you know, in the midst of building itself, was a really powerful fantasy. And it also gave us access to probably what we think is the best bunch of secondary characters we've had yet in the franchise. People like George Washington, Ben Franklin, Charles Lee, Lafayette, von Steuben, who I've mentioned. You know, we think that people really liked meeting Leonardo in Assassin's Creed 2, not because anyone had gone out and read a history book about who this guy was, but just because you knew just enough about him. You knew, you know, that he was a painter, you knew that he was an inventor, you'd heard the name, and so it was this magical moment of meeting him. And we really hope that you'll get the same kick out of meeting a bunch of these guys in our game. We also chose a Native American assassin. So why did we do this? Basically, when we started out, We knew we didn't want to tell a story that was about Mel Gibson in The Patriot defending, Americans and the land of the free. And we didn't want to tell a story about anyone defending king and country either. We wanted someone who's a step removed from the conflict. And historically, this is accurate. Also fits with some ideas we had about having a minority as a lead character, of having an outsider as a lead character, these sort of unusual flavors for most video games. And we thought this was a much more fun fantasy to dig into. But we took the process really, really seriously. We didn't want to, have Tom Hanks in The Last of the Mohicans. We really wanted someone to embody Connor who was himself half Native American. And this is very hard. If you're ever casting yourself a film with Native Americans in it, be aware that everybody was in Twilight. And it is very, very hard to find an actual Native American actor who wasn't. But we found this guy, Noah Watts. He's fantastic. He himself is half Blackfoot, half American. So he really felt this character, and he really helped us bring him to life. We worked with native consultants in the Kanienka community near us to make sure that our language was appropriate. There's a whole section of the game in the middle where we actually perform it in the appropriate language. And as something that I'd never heard before, and I'm sure most people here haven't heard before, but it leads, or it gives you a sense of authenticity in the scene that I think is really powerful. That said, we still had a really big problem if you put it together. The idea was there was a Native American, but he's also part of the 18th century, and they have a particular style of dress, and of course, he's an assassin. So what on earth does this guy look like? And again, it's something we've seen a lot of discussion on forums about which one of these flavors we should have chosen. But just for those doubters, here we grabbed one image we found. This is actually winter campaign dress from the mid-18th century in America, and not only is he wearing a hood, it's a white hood. But yes, not very common, but true nonetheless. But we went through a bunch of different revisions. You can see here on the left some of the really crazy ones. We had ideas. We'd like to push the boundaries at first just to get a sense of how far you can go and see reactions from people. So you've got the crazy sort of eagle outfit there, which was really never going to work. The middle one looks a bit too like The Matrix. It's like Keanu Reeves has arrived in Assassin's Creed, and he's going to help us. And the one on the right, you see a lot of stuff that made it through. You see the sash, you see the leggings. So we were getting closer at this point, but the whole kind of wolf, it felt a little too fantasy. It felt a little too over the top for where we wanted to be.
Yeah, from an animation perspective, I really just care that he looks awesome. We need him to look good from all angles because as an in-game character, he's just got to have a great silhouette. This is something you really care about from an animation perspective. So we went through, these are just like a small number of them. We worked on Connor for about around a year and a half, kept putting new versions in the game, seeing how he looked, because of course we didn't start from nothing. We started from Ezio, we just replaced them, then we changed the animations out. So one thing that we knew we wanted to go back to was the clean white look of Altair from the first game. So we did so many different hoods, and it was really important to get a really strong silhouette. Like one of them is close to kind of what we ended up with. One other cool thing we did that you might not notice in the game is we always add a shadow under the hood now, so it really feels a lot closer to what you think of when you see the assassin on a lot of the websites and things. You never see his eyes, so it feels a lot closer to that in the end. And this is what we ended up with. You've seen him in the game. One thing I was worried about was losing a lot of this, we call it secondary motion that he had on his cloth. It really helps blend all the animations together, and it's something that Assassin's Creed is known for. But what we found was just having enough coattails there, it feels very Assassin's Creed, but having all the objects on the back of him move in physics really helped to ground him in the world and make him feel like he's a heavy character.
We're running long. I'm going to speed it up. Okay. So the frontier, we're talking about navigation. Why did we choose the frontier? Why did we choose forests? Basically, we thought it was really a huge opportunity to do something that people hadn't done in games before, which is to create a forest that's actually a 3D playground. A lot of games, Skyrim, terrific games, have had forests, and they're really beautiful, but it doesn't matter that they're trees. These could be lampposts or mailboxes or whatever. You don't care about them in gameplay terms, and we really wanted to deliver on this fantasy of, you could be on the ground or you could be in the branches, that you look at each tree as a gameplay object in the same way that Assassin's Creed 1 made you look at buildings as gameplay objects.
Here's another video we created right at the start.
Sorry, you can do it.
So he totally cut me off there. But what I was going to say is that this is part of a longer 7-minute video that we created at the start of the game to go with the context that you saw earlier that we could use for two things. It was one, to allow us to put all our ideas together and essentially get an idea of what ACE3 was like. And if you look at it now, and then you look at our game that we ended up with, they're really similar. In fact, most of the moves that are in these videos are in there. But the other thing was it was really good because our teams are so big, every person that came onto the project could see them and just like instantly get a snapshot of what we wanted to do. So we can start this one. This is kind of showing you a lot of the thought process afterwards. Because the navigation is such a big deal in Assassin's Creed, you can just run it playing. So we started with some initial tests. There's the old character. We're comparing the new to the old. We have we knew we were looking for a lot more variety in the movement. Previously, you only had one style of jumping. And then so we started putting them in the game. This is just it looks very rough, but it's trying to get an idea of what we wanted. You also see that a lot of the trees, they look like video game trees, so we had to keep working on that. So at some point we discovered this thing. This is an air ramp, and it's essentially a pneumatic explosion that can send a mocap actor up in the air. And you'll see it here. This is one of the smaller jumps. So we ended up throwing this guy off of blocks here. He's jumping and stuff, and it gave us much more airtime. It gave us the style that we wanted, and you'll see he's using a lot of arm movement, which is very different from the previous Assassins. He has to do that in order to balance. We found that this was so successful that we were able to continue and just keep getting different kinds of parkour. And one thing that I'm especially proud of that you're about to see here is the Passover move. This is something that parkour is essentially trying to move from one space to the next in the most efficient way. But free running, as you're seeing here, is more about player expression. So you have a little bit of control over how you want to do it. And you'll actually see it's going to give away, but you see Desmond has some of the more flashier moves you can choose to do. We use this also for, if you've seen the pass-through move, when he can run through a building to get to the other side. And they really helped give us a different feel from the previous Assassins.
And it's funny to see that for Desmond, because one of our in-house rules is the assassin never spins,
Yep.
but Desmond can spin.
Yep.
He can twirl his way to success. So we took the same approach to combat. Why would we rebuild it? It works, everybody knows it. And we took it as a big challenge, which is it's easy in big franchises to coast and to continue things and not touch things. We really thought we could do better. So we rebuilt Connor as an assassin to be a dual-wielding specialist. All the animations are new. The player tactics are new. You will not be able to succeed using the same strategies that you used before. We did everything from saying, okay, we want you to be able to run in and out of combat for a couple of reasons. One, so that the controls never change. So right trigger or right shoulder, depending on which console you're on, is still free run all the time now, in fight, out of fight, so blockers on a face button. We changed the strategy for counters, so once you counter, you get a little window of time where you can choose then to kill him, or try and kill him, or trip him up, or take his gun. All of this comes into a really smooth, free-flowing combat system where you can go from kill to kill to kill if you're good enough, and you pick the enemy archetypes appropriately, and also gives us a running assassination move, so you can run in, hit assassination, and run straight out, just pick one guy off, which I think is really cool.
So here's another section from that same 7-minute video, just showcasing the fight.
Everyone loves stabbing a guy in the head with a bayonet and then blowing his hat off. I don't know what it says about people, but everyone loves it. So snow and weather, we'll try to go quick. It was a big deal for us. The joke we always tell is we're from Quebec, and if you're not scared of winter in Quebec, you don't really live there. And what we wanted to do was get that into the game. It was a big issue in the historical period. We tried to get, as I said, lots of these fantasies from from the history as well, and so we wanted to put that in there.
And here's this, just because we couldn't mocap snow, so...
This is game development, people.
Yep. We're always saying, if you couldn't do good snow animation in Montreal, you can't do it anywhere.
Thankfully, Connor looks a little more elegant
Yeah.
when he does it. But yeah, we got that idea. You could fall in holes. It was good. So weather, just very quickly, there's all kinds of different weather in the new game. There's fog, obviously affects your view distance. There's rain, it's mostly just there for mood. We use it in key scenes this time, but it switches on and off organically. And it's the snow which changes based on sequence, which changes gameplay. So you can catch up with people if you're chasing them through the frontier. It pushes you to use branches and climb in trees. And we really like the fact that it's everywhere. Again, seasons don't just come to the tops of mountains and little parts of the map. In our game, when it changes, all the cities, all the locations are in the middle of winter. And finally, talking about naval battles, it's one of those things where people say, oh, it doesn't fit, it's crazy. But when we started doing our research, we just thought that we couldn't avoid this part of the game. If you arrived in America from somewhere else, obviously you came on a boat. Any imported goods arrived on boats. As I said in the introduction, the French blockade, the naval fleet, forced the surrender in the American Revolution. They're everywhere in the history. And so we thought, well, this is a chance to peel off a small part of our development team and take some chances and do something really, really different. And we also learned, based on previous experience, that the way if we're going to insert elements like this, what we should do is make sure they align with the core pillars of the main game. So as I said at the start, the game is about fight and navigation and stealth. So we made sure this time that it's still third person, it's still action adventure, and it's still about navigation and combat. So we really feel that it's a nice, clean fit for the game. So this is a lot of naval tests that we had. We'll just show you some fun videos of the guys in Singapore. Their weather is a lot better than here or where we live, so you'll be sad. So we thought we'd end just with a shot. Everyone's also always wondering how big the Assassins team is. It's very large. So this is us, of course, everywhere. But it's 3 years of a lot of overtime for us. This is Montreal, Singapore, Annecy in France, Quebec City, and Shanghai. So from all of us, we really hope you enjoy the game, and thanks so much for coming today.